Maddy Dychtwald is the co-founder, along with her husband, Ken Dychtwald, of the globally renowned think tank AgeWave. And, Maddy has spent the better part of the last 40 years not just researching, but sharing information on the changing culture of aging. She is an internationally acclaimed author and thought leader whose lifelong mission has pretty much been to help women live better and live longer. And that mission, that lifetime of work, all comes together now in her new book, in which she not only shares the latest knowledge from the world's top aging experts, and I mean just about everybody, but really maybe even more importantly than that, she then translates that information from the experts into insight in very clear action steps to help all women live better and live longer. The book is called Ageless Aging, A Woman's Guide to Increasing Healthspan, Brainspan, and Lifespan. Let's welcome Maddy Dychtwald. Maddy, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Nice to be here with you, Marc. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time. And I got to tell you, this is a challenge because your book is about this thick. And honestly, it may be the most comprehensive book on the subject of aging that I have ever read. So, where to begin is difficult, but let's start here. Because we talk a lot about a new life stage, because we are in the midst of a longevity revolution. And in truth, it is women who are leading the way. It's women, not a guarantee, but maybe have the greatest opportunity to take advantage. Talk about the demographics of women aging.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. We are at the early stages of this longevity revolution, which impacts all of us. However, it's women who have kind of won the longevity lottery. I mean, we live right now on average 6 years longer than men. So on the surface, that sounds like great news. But while men die quicker, women actually get sicker. And that's even when you correct for our longer lives. So we've got this challenge going on that we've got to figure out how we can better match how healthy we are, our health spans, to how long we live, our lifespans. And there are some steps we can take. It's really in our control now more than ever before.
Who did you write the book for? Obviously women, but I got to tell you guys, if you're listening to this, the vast majority of what's in this book applies to anybody that's a human being. It is definitely targeted toward women, but who did you write it for? Is there a particular age group? Is there a particular kind of women that you were trying to speak to?
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, Marc, I've been on this aging longevity retirement beat for close to 40 years. And you do the math. That means I started in my 30s. I'm now 74 years old. So what I really began to realize is that by looking around me, I saw millions and millions of women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond who are dealing with the aches and pains of life, who are maybe dealing with a chronic condition, maybe inflammatory diseases, maybe they just want to feel more energetic and more vital. And I realized that I wanted to be able to come up with a way that these women, us women, could really live better longer. And what really inspired me was the fact that the latest research, and by the way, I talked to more than 100 experts, scientists, researchers, physicians, everyone seemed to agree that while it used to be all about our genetic package that sort of indicated how long we'd live and how well we'd live, that's not the case anymore. Science has really begun to show us that it's our lifestyle and our environment that really dictated by almost 90%. Now, that puts the control directly in the hands of women. Yet, what's crazy, and I really, I love men. I think men are the best. Love them so much. However, men and women are different. Let's be honest about it. Sure, there are certain things that are great for men and great for women, but our genetic makeup is slightly different. And yet, most of the books out there on longevity, they were written by men. So I felt like I had to change that narrative. I had to speak directly to women, whether they be wellness veterans or just at the beginning of their wellness journey, and that was one of the challenges in writing the book, trying to do both things at once. Yeah, I wanted to give them the tips, the hacks, the action steps they need to live better longer right now.
We're talking with Maddy Dychtwald, who has written a fascinating book called Ageless Aging. And Maddy, one of the things that we've discovered at Growing Bolder is that you can quote experts and statistics and research, but it's what we call the someone like me effect. When we can see ourselves in others is when we really learn things. And maybe you're a perfect example because, as we said, you've spent 40 years working alongside your husband, Ken, working with the true cutting edge thought leaders in this world on longevity. You knew, what it was like to have to face aging. You understood the implications of an ageist culture. You understood how mindset controls the way we live. But yet you were in your 60s and you were struggling. So before we talk about, how people can live better longer, take us into your story a little bit because there were some dark days for you in your 60s when you experienced much of what you talk about.
That's right. And by the way, that was one of my motivators in writing the book because I've always lived a pretty healthy life. I'm an exercise addict, love to exercise, which by the way saved me. But let me kind of explain better. Okay, so didn't know this, but I was born with hip dysplasia, which today with babies and infants, they correct it. But, I was born 74 years ago. They didn't even know what hip dysplasia was. And I didn't either. But what happened was because I am an exercise fanatic, I started getting a lot of pain in my hips. And frankly, I started walking with a limp. And my kids looked around and they said, Mom, hey, like you're not looking great. You're looking like you're in a lot of pain. And in fact, I was. So ultimately, I went to an orthopedic doctor who insisted I get an MRI, got an MRI, and he sat down with me. He literally grabbed my hands and said, okay, you are bone on bone in both your hips. And I literally burst out hysterical crying because I was like, oh my God, I feel like I've done such a good job of eating healthy. I literally have not eaten red meat since I was like 25 years old. I eat mostly a plant-based diet. How could this happen to me? And what I realized was it did happen to me. And I said, so what should I do? And he said, you need to get hip surgery in both of your hips, do one, do the other. And I said, but if you were me, what would you do? He said, I'd go to, and he gave me the name of an orthopedist who specializes in doing both hips at once. And that's what I did. I got both my hips done at once. But between the time that I decided to do this hip surgery and the time, there was a couple months. And I said to this famous surgeon, what should I do? I'm going on vacation. I want to hike. He said to me, get a cane. And I'm like, whoa, that is just not who I want to be. And, I understand that a lot of people use canes and that's fine. But I was in my 60s and I felt like I was in the prime of my health in so many ways. I just didn't see that as being the image of who I wanted to be. So I did some research and I talked to people like Andy Weil and Marc, and they gave me advice. They told me to go on an anti-inflammatory diet, which I hadn't been doing. That means it's not complicated, but I cut out gluten, I cut out all sugar, and I cut out dairy. And it wasn't even that hard. And they told me to keep up my exercise, but to treat my body with love. I made a few other changes, and in the process of doing so, within 6 weeks, all of my pain in my hips went away. And I began to realize that food could actually be medicine. And I also changed my sleep patterns and I realized that, you know what? So can sleep. And of course, so can exercise. And there's a variety of other elements. And I began to realize there was this kind of holistic recipe. For instance, I'd never meditated before. And Andy Weil said to me, meditate. And I did. And I got to tell you, it really, really made a difference. I'm a horrible meditator. Even to this day, I'm not great at meditating, but it taught me how to calm down my mind and also how to reframe some of my negative thoughts, because I certainly had negative thoughts at that time, into positive ones. So the bottom line, Mark, is that this surgeon said to me, okay, you'll probably be in the hospital a week and you probably won't be able to walk without assistance for a month. So like change your house around. And I decided that I didn't want to do that. We live in 3 stories. And I said, if I have to just stay to 1 story, that's the way it'll be. But with this program that I created for myself, I was really able to get out of the hospital after 1 day. And they don't let you leave the hospital unless you can walk stairs. So I was kind of in a great space. Went home, and within 2 days, I was able to walk without any assistance. Now, granted, I looked like a duck when I walked. I looked so silly, but I was able to get around without any assistance, which was very empowering for me, because I feel like I want to be this independent, positive image of what it's like to get older. And, frankly, I'm in better shape now, which is about 5 years later, 6 years maybe, than I've ever been in my entire life. And I kept the change. I don't recommend a diet per se. I think the diet wars are kind of crazy. But for me, an anti-inflammatory diet, especially as you get older, is like a godsend. It just helped me cope with my aches and pains.
Wow, so much to unpack there. You mentioned, really a holistic plan, and that's really what this book is. It's not just one thing. And you touched on sleep and you touched on diet, and I've read tons of books about aging where they will say sleep is important and here's 3 tips. I mean, you dig down into all of these in a way, that is enlightening. And I want to get back to some of that, but let me ask you this, because I think one of the biggest threats to how we age is ageism. It's had a devastating impact on all of our mindsets. It has a devastating impact on our belief system about getting older. Ageism affects every one of us, but I have to think, and is it fair to say, Maddy, that ageism affects women more than men, and the devastation that it can inflict on women can be incredible?
Yeah, absolutely. It can even have financial ramifications. I mean, look at it in the workplace. The fact is that there's something that has been identified as lookism. Now, as women get older and as men get older, they're treated a little bit differently. Now, I'm not saying men don't get ageism thrown in their face, but it's far worse for women. Men, they get older, they look distinguished and maybe wiser. Women, they just get old. And that just doesn't feel fair at all. And what's really interesting is one of the people that I interviewed for this book, from the research that she has done, she found some really remarkable things. First, she found that younger people are very negatively affected by this negative narrative on aging. They fear it so much that you see young girls in their 20s getting Botox. Now, that's a little crazy. I mean, I think everybody should do what they want to do in terms of trying to look whatever way they want to look, but that's very young to start something, to feel like you're growing old in a way that can't be managed. So that's one thing. The other thing is that there's been research done by Becca Levy from Yale, and her research is totally enlightening, because she went out and did long-term studies on older adults and found that by having a negative point of view about your own aging and the aging of other people around you, that it can actually take years off your life. And having a positive attitude can, in fact, add years to your life, up to 10 years. Now, so that's great. We want to live longer. But what I find particularly exciting is it's not just the number of years, but the number of healthy years. You really begin to live healthier if you can reframe your whole perspective on aging, that it's a good thing. It can be a very positive thing. More years to reinvent yourself, spend time with your family and friends. And if you have grandchildren, your grandchildren. I have a dog. I love spending time with my dog. It gives, and also maybe you want a second career, or maybe you want to continue in your career or volunteer your time. It just opens up the prism so that you can look into the future and kind of be, in many ways, who you always dreamed of being.
You know what we find? There are still a lot of older adults out there that just think that this is almost toxic positivity, and they immediately
Yeah.
default to the excuse that they have bad genes, and they will disregard the example of a healthier 80 or 90-year-old is simply the result of some sort of genetic blessing that they don't have. But research now unequivocally proves otherwise, does it not, Maddie?
You're absolutely right. Calico, which is on the cutting edge of longevity research, they recently came out by saying that up to 90% of our health and our well-being and our longevity are because of the way we live, our lifestyle and our environment. Now, that's kind of interesting because it used to be, and not that long ago, that we thought it was all about genetics. But that's not the case anymore. Your genetics are a predisposition to what kinds of illness you may deal with, or your energy and vitality, your aches and pains, but it's your epigenetics. So that's how your genes express themselves, which is totally within your control. And to me, that is very exciting news, that there are steps you can take right here and right now, including, as you just mentioned, kind of reframing our point of view about aging and how we feel about our own aging, that can actually help us to live better longer.
These are fascinating topics, folks. And if you've ever really kind of been afraid to dig into it or been overwhelmed by, what has happened in the field of longevity research, Maddie, this is one of the things I've really liked the most about your book. It honestly, it gives as good of an overview of the hallmarks of aging as I have ever seen. You have an ability to make some fascinating but fairly complex subjects totally understandable, and epigenetics, which you just described as one of those. The idea that whether the genes that might be resulting in some sort of cancer or whatever express themselves depending upon the way you live your life is something everybody should know. And if you're wondering, what you can do to help impact the way you age. This is another thing I love about this book is you actually list accelerants to age and decelerants to age side by side. If you want to age more healthily, do this. If you're doing this, it's not a good thing. You've got a lot of actionable stuff in there. So talk a little bit about that. You didn't just present the research. You just didn't tell people, what's possible. You actually show them how to do it, what steps to take.
Yeah, let me begin by saying that I think that women love knowledge, and there's so much confusion out there about, what kind of diets you could have, how much you should sleep, what about your hormones, about these other things like, sitting is the new smoking. We hear this phrase, but what the heck does it even mean? So there are all these conversations out there that make us think, well, what should I do? And so I wanted to clear up the confusion. So I really wanted to create a safe space, if you will, for women to get the kind of knowledge and information that's straightforward and not necessarily for me. By the way, this is one of the interesting things. We had a lot of interest in this book when I was trying to sell it to publishers. So there were 17 interested publishers, and I chose to go with the Mayo Clinic Press because I'm not a doctor, and I thought that their credibility would really add to mine. And in addition to which, they insisted, because I was one of the only authors they've ever had that is not a doctor, they insisted it go through a medical review. So that was kind of scary for me. I'm like, oh my God, say they think everything I'm saying is bunk. And it was such a good experience for two reasons. One, they didn't think it was a bunch of bunk. There was very few things that they disagreed with me about, and I was able to change. But second was that they had three doctors weigh in on things, and they all had different opinions. So what I was able to do is to talk to almost 100 different experts and scientists and medical experts of all kinds, physicians. And I was able to kind of triangulate what is the truth, what is really going on here. And so that's the first thing I try to do in my book is clear up the confusion and get the facts right for women in particular. Second thing that I tried to do was that I wanted to make sure that I could speak to both those who were wellness veterans who didn't want the simple stuff. They wanted the more complex information, and talk to those who are at the beginning of their wellness journey. So talking to both of those audiences was a little complicated. That's part of why it's a long book, because I have advice at the end of every single chapter that's first, if you do just one thing about, say, sleep or hormones or the sense of purpose, do this thing. If you're a wellness veteran, do this. If you're just starting your wellness journey, try this. And then I list for every single chapter at least a few action steps or hacks that can really help you to live better longer. Some are really simple to do and don't have to cost any money at all. Other things are low cost, and other things, you're making an investment in your health. But one of the doctors I spoke to said to me, if you have any money at all, investing it in your health is probably one of the best investments you can ever make, better than any stock or bond.
Amen to that. That is the wealth health connection. The two are inextricably
Right.
combined. You can't improve one without the other. I'm glad you mentioned the Mayo Clinic because you quote a Mayo physician, Stephen Kopecky, who says nutrition is the number one risk factor for early death and early disease. And your book has got lots of great nutrition and diet advice, but it all begins, you say, with cutting out sugar. How big of a problem is sugar in the American diet?
Yeah, it's toxic. I mean, I think we've all heard, don't eat sugar, and it's very difficult to do because it's in so many of the foods that we eat. But I would say, yes, it's toxic. Cut it out as much as you can, because what it does to your brain health. And by the way, from the studies we've done at AgeWave, we know that the number one fear of both women and men over the age of 50 is their fear of getting cognitive decline or Alzheimer's disease. Now, cutting out sugar, and I hate to say it, even like wine and spirits. I really do hate to say it because I love wine. And I've actually stopped in doing the research for my book. I've pretty much stopped drinking wine, not altogether, but pretty much. And if I do drink it, I drink organic, because the chemicals in wine and what they do, if you knew the process they use to create that wine, you may think twice about it.
You know what? Don't say it, but that's the truth. It's stuff we need to know, and we have to learn it. And yeah, and obviously, folks, you can't get vitality in a pill. But that said, Maddy Dychtwald, the sale of supplements is soaring. Do you take supplements, and if so, what do you believe in?
Okay, yeah, I do take supplements. Let me begin by saying most doctors will not recommend any. If they recommend any, very few supplements. And that's because they are not FDA approved. And so, keep that in mind. And I think the brand that you buy really matters, because some of them are like their manufacturing process, in fact, can put toxins into the product. And that's another thing that doctors are very concerned about. But many doctors today will recommend taking vitamin D, taking an omega-3 supplement so that you can really protect heart health. And it's really good for your brain as well, which is fantastic. So taking those, and also magnesium has really gotten some traction with physicians lately, because it kind of calms your system down, and stress is such a huge deal. And magnesium can really help with that. And of course, there's different kinds of magnesiums, but that's a whole other conversation. I myself, there's one other thing I should say. Take a probiotic. Now, Andrea Pfeiffer, who runs a biotech firm that's focused on coming up with a prevention for Alzheimer's disease, she told me the only thing she takes is a probiotic, because that gut-brain connection is very strong and becoming more and more evident with all the science and research that's being done at the cutting edge. So yes, take a probiotic. Very important to take a good probiotic. Can't say that enough. I myself take a lot of other things. But I've used myself as a guinea pig, and one of the things that I would suggest to people is CoQ10. I love it. It's oftentimes combined with an omega-3, so that makes it easier. And and I kind of experiment with some of the things at the cutting edge, like NAD precursors. So I do take NAD. I don't feel any different. I don't feel bad from it. So I'm assuming it's working on a cellular level, and that I just don't see the difference, but we'll see.
Well, I haven't known you before, so I can't say that I see the difference, but I know that NAD allegedly is responsible for increasing the mitochondria, the energy cells,
That's right.
and based upon what I've seen in this interview, it's doing its thing for you, Maddy. You got a lot of energy.
I do. I have tons of energy. My kids kid around and call me the Energizer Bunny, and I love being like an action-oriented person. So that's me always, but I haven't slowed down, and that's the good news. I haven't slowed down, and I do believe that NAD may have actually helped in that particular zone. The other thing that I should tell you, and this is about a product that happens to be a prescription drug called metformin, that a lot of the biohackers, mostly men, use and are experimenting with, called metformin. And it's, clinically, it's FDA approved for diabetes, but it does seem to have an impact on longevity. But I would add, for men, I experimented with it. My doctor didn't really like the idea, but was willing to give it a try with me, just as long as I kept getting tested. But I didn't even need to get tested. After taking it for 3 days, I got so completely sick to my stomach, literally. I had gut problems for weeks from taking it. So I immediately stopped. But this is a good example of something else, Mark, and that is that, and this is something I did not know before I started writing this book. It wasn't until 2016 that the FDA said that drug companies had to include women in their trials.
Wow.
So metformin was never tested on women. It's been around forever, not tested on women. And, I'm a case in point how it just didn't work.
We could go forever. Let me begin to wrap this up, because I still have a few more questions. But I think one of the biggest fears of aging, especially for women, is invisibility. And in your book, you say you have to master the subtle art of not giving a That's true to some extent, isn't it? It's hard to tune out all of the negativism, that has to do with growing older. When in fact, yes, some of our physical abilities will gradually decline, but we gain so many things. From your research, Maddie, what kind of powers do we get? What things can we gain as we get older?
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. The point is that as we live longer, and this is based on studies that we've done at AgeWave, studies that have been done in Stanford and at Yale and Harvard, we've seen some remarkable gains. And let me just name a few of them. First of all, we know that resilience is the ability to bounce back from negative things happening to you. Our resilience really gets so much stronger as we live longer. We saw that during COVID. We saw, for instance, when it came to mental well-being, it was the Gen Z generation that suffered the most. And the older generations generally knew, hey, you know what? I've been through bad stuff before. I've seen the market go up and down. I've seen wars. I've seen pestilence. I've seen it all. And I've come through to the other side. So I've got this resilience. There's also this idea that we accumulate a certain amount of experience and maybe even for some of us, some wisdom. And that's a pretty great thing that we can be like the wise elders to the younger generation and create some more intergenerational relationships that, we can give information and experience to them and they can help us with the tech and other things like that. But creating these intergenerational bridges is really important, and our wisdom and experience really can help us get there. And the other thing that I found truly amazing from our studies, and it was backed up by Stanford, is that as you begin to hit 50, 60, 70, and beyond, your levels of happiness and life satisfaction and contentment, they actually grow. Now, that's interesting. At the same time, and I kind of hinted at this before, our levels of anxiety actually get lower. Now, that's really good news.
It's great news. It's fabulous news. And I read that study that AgeWave just put out that I think it was 80% of people 60 and older, I'll get the numbers flip-flopped, say that the best time of their life is right now or ahead of them, which is
That's
just
right.
phenomenal news for everybody. There's so many great parts of this book, folks. I mean, you've got a chapter on hormones are your frenemies. You do a deep dive into hormone therapy, the risks, the rewards. That's something that a lot of women are talking about. What's the takeaway when it comes to hormone therapy these days?
Yeah, well, I will tell you that when I sent my book out, the galleys, the early for editors and such, for women in their 40s and 50s, this chapter in particular was loaded with information that they really, really need and they really want, and they're hungry for it. This new generation of younger women in their 40s and 50s, they want to take menopause out of the closet, and I applaud that. So here's the bottom line. There is a lot of misinformation out there about hormone therapy. And, I spoke to a few of the physicians who are menopause experts, one at Mayo Clinic and one at, she does all the testing for I don't know if you know who Dr. Walter Longo is, but he's at USC and he happens to be the guy, the pioneer behind intermittent fasting. And he uses this particular physician, Dr. Felice Gersh, and her patients to test a lot of his products and his concepts behind aging and longevity. But anyway, back to menopause. Yeah, they say that the study that was done in, I think it was 2005 on menopause, the Women's Health Initiative, that information in there has brought gynecologists and other physicians down the wrong track. I mean, this study went on at a time when the general thought was that hormone therapy was a good thing, and this study actually denounced it. But keep in mind that they were using they weren't using normal stuff. They weren't using bioidentical hormones. They were using hormones that came from a horse's urine. And it was just like, it's kind of gross when you get into the details. But the point of it is, if you just want the bottom line here, is that that study gave erroneous facts to both the general public, who got frightened to death about hormone therapy and avoided it, and then also to physicians who, particularly those who were trained in the early 2000s. Now, the general point of view is that for most women, not all women, but for most women, hormone therapy is generally a good thing. And it's not just to get rid of the hot flashes and, make your brain fog go away, but it actually has some benefit to your overall health and well-being, well beyond those kinds of symptoms. For instance, cognitive decline is really halted if you do hormone therapy to a great extent. Now, that's really good news. The people who should beware are those who have breast cancer in their families, or any kind of other cancer that has to do with fertility.
The book has everything, and we don't have time to go into sleep tips and chronic pain and cognitive decline and pelvic health and the power of purpose, the importance of socialization, fitness, food, medicine, sleep. I mean, it does it all. Give us, if you will, the takeaway about life in general, Maddy, and maybe I don't know whether it's in your book or not. I didn't see it, but what have you learned about life in general that you'd like to share with the rest of us? What's the key to a happy, healthy life? What's life about?
Yeah. Okay. That's a big question, Mark. Before I say that, I do want to say one thing about sleep. I think sleep is really important. Keep in mind that I spoke to a variety of different sleep experts, and I learned that most of the big studies on sleep have not been done on people over the age of 65. They don't even include people over the age of 65. Wow. So it's something to keep in mind when you think about sleep. And one of the pieces of advice that I think is just pretty straightforward is, if you wake up feeling well rested, you're getting enough sleep. So I thought that, that's like a sigh of relief. And the reason I mention that now when you ask this question is, I think that we've got to look at life as a journey of discovery and dreams come true, and that we're going to have some bad stuff happen along the way, and finding ways to deal with them directly and not try to avoid them is a really good thing. And to keep a positive attitude. I will say that I think our attitudes and our expectations make a huge difference in how we approach our lives and how we feel about our lives. And, change is hard. Making changes is one of the hardest things I see anyone do. But what I learned from my book is, in talking to experts who are way smarter about this than me, is that it takes about 90 days to change a habit. And if you really want to make some changes, just create some new habits. Maybe it's just as simple as, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you put in your body is some warm water with lemon. I mean, it gets the juices going in your gut in a positive way. And opening up your shades and welcoming the day, the sun, getting your circadian rhythms going. I mean, these kinds, and saying some positive messages to yourself. I mean, these may sound corny and goofy, but if you do it for a few days, you're going to find that you're feeling a little different.
We need more people like Maddy Dychtwald to write books, because Maddy, you've done the research, you've been in the field for years and years, you've got the connections, you have the ability to get the answers, and maybe most importantly, you have the ability to translate those answers into a book, an incredible volume that can help people live longer and better. I know you are far from done, but what an important contribution to your legacy and to the general knowledge base when it comes to healthy aging for women of all kinds. Folks, it's called A Woman's Guide to Increasing Healthspan, Brainspan, and Lifespan. And get it for yourself. Get it for a friend. Get it for the woman you love. And for you guys, read it yourself, because a lot of the secrets that Maddy shares apply to anyone of any age. She is Maddy Dychtwald, and the book, once again, is called Ageless Aging. You can pick it up just about anywhere you get good books.